I just realized that I have committed a huge crime, a very severe crime, one of the cardinal sins of YouTube, not the actual YouTube terms and conditions and rules, but the accepted rules of the YouTube videos that are about music. So I forgot to put a bona fide full ranking of all the albums of the bands that I made videos about. You can see the in-depth videos. I'm gonna keep it short and sweet today, just run through each of these bands and their records and rank them according to my order of preferences. And the videos were Tull and Maiden, and before that I had Motorhead and Priest, and the first one was Thin Lizzy and Gary Moore. Gary Moore I'm not doing today because there is another big feature in the works, so I'll leave it for that time. And let's go with Tull. So Jethro Tull also released a large number of records. This is my all-time favorite, Heavy Horses. I know this is not the most common choice for Tull fans, but again, this is my opinion and my order. Stand Up, I think this one is much more acceptable among Tull enthusiasts, as well as this one, Benefit. And so far we have Heavy Horses, this was Benefit, and another one you guys not gonna like, Broadsword and the Beast. Great record, and this is sounding more modernish, and there was one of the big criticisms against it, that it's too heavy metal, too modern, but it also works in a lot of elements of folk, which Anderson was doing since the early 70s. And I was always wondering whether Anderson's mix of prog and folk, or rather folk and prog, could result in frog, right? Folk, prog. So maybe Jethro Tull is frog rock. Anyway, next up comes Stormwatch, another excellent record. Yes, kind of polished, kind of commercial sounding, but a great song. There's not a bad song on the album. They're all great playing, great guitar playing from Martin Barre as usual. And next up comes Songs from the Wood. The back cover, in my opinion, should have been on the front, would have been one of the greatest album covers of all time. Again, another one, great whistling, a lot of folkish elements being mixed in this album. So I think this is the top 5 or 6. Minstrel in the Gallery, most people will be much more accepting of this choice. Next up is Aqualung, again a timeless classic. This is probably their single most famous record. If it isn't, then this is Thick as a Brick. Again, kind of a interesting record to get in. It was a joke. There's a lot of humor here mixed in the music and the packaging as well. In the longer video that I did about all the albums and history of the band, I presented it as if this were an actual, true, real newspaper. Newsflash, it isn't. And it hasn't been since 1972. Next up we have, which one should I bring up first? They both gonna piss people off, but I think right now I feel a little bit like going with this at number 9 or 10, wherever we are. Rock Island, great record. Again, a departure from what you would expect from Jethro Tull. A lot of people accuse Jethro Tull of going heavy metal and going kind of ZZ Top, and maybe there is something in this accusation. I don't take it too seriously. This was Jethro Tull at that time, and this was Jethro Tull at their beginning. Their first and only record with Mick Abrams, and until fairly recently, the only Jethro Tull record not to feature Martin Barre. And to be honest, I don't really consider the the albums without Beret to be Jethro Tull albums, besides the fact that I didn't really have a chance to listen to them. I heard a little bit from the Zeta Gene and the Rückflute that he just released. I don't take them too seriously. Those are honestly Ian Anderson solo projects, and it's pretty dishonest in my estimation that he released them as tour releases. So that's the top 10 or maybe 11. And I didn't bother pulling out the other records. I'll just go with the top 10 or 5 or what. In part because I don't have them, or not all of them, and in part because it would be too much of a pain to pull them out, and it's not really germane. It's mostly for the clickbait effect. And after This Was and Rock Island, I will go with War Child. That's also more accepted, but there's a lot of people who are also raining about them. I think that's the first one that they accused of being commercial and being a little bit too up to contemporary trends. Then we're gonna go into the 90s, Catfish Rising, Roots to Branches. They're all good records. Crest of a Knave was also derided at its time, but everybody agrees on Budapest, the amazing track that practically no one or very few bands are capable of pulling off something like that, especially live, right? And let's go back to the 70s now. There's another one from the 70s that ranks pretty low for me, and that's Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die. To me, they were a little bit loss of ideas. They cobbled some ideas together, but in general terms, the album doesn't sound that great to me. Then we have A, also a great album, not so Tull-ish. It was initially intended to be an Anderson solo project. That's where the A comes from, A for Anderson. It's a good record. I like listening to it, but it's not going in the vein of the classic Tull. It's a more modern, more keyboard and synthesizer oriented. That's when Anderson really started to experiment a lot with synthesizers and such. Next up we go to jtoll.com, another good record, pretty modern, has its moments, but all in all, definitely not the best Tull album. Then you have the Christmas album, which is also is a good listen. There are some good takes and good spins on old songs. Some of them were reproduced almost the way they were. So that's kind of halfway compilation album anyway. And then I would go with the other records, Passion Play, which I never liked too much, and of course Under Wraps, which is absolutely horrible. And then on the bottom, probably that's where they will rank when I listen to them, but I'm already biased against them. So the last two, Rock Float and Jellet Zine. So this is it for Jethro Tull. Let's go to the next band in chronological order, which would be Thin Lizzy. Let's take a look, shall we? Okay, another one that you're gonna hate me for, but my ultimate number one for Thin Lizzy is this guy, Renegade. I have my head too far up Snowy White's ass to be able to say otherwise, but even without it, the accusation that this is the least Lizzy-ish record is, in my estimation, true. This is a very un-Thin Lizzy record, and yet I think that this is their best record. They go all over the place, they explore different things. Snowy White is playing very well with Scott, and that's not his forte. He is not a Glenn Tipton, KK Downing, or Todd Turner, Andy Powell, Todd Turner, what the other one guy from Wishbone-ish kind of. He's not a dual guitar player, in short. Why am I even opening this instinctively? So anyway, Renegade, not a bad song on the record. I love all the songs, and I think I told you in the previous video that if Angel of Death ranks all the way on the bottom, that means that the others are bangers one after the other. Insane record in my opinion, but I don't expect too many people to agree with me on this one. The next one also tends to be somewhat controversial because a lot of people had the impression that Gary Moore came over and just bulldozed everybody and made this Gary Moore record. I agree. It's almost could be that it says here Gary Moore instead of Thin Lizzy. Not to that extent, but there is some truth in this accusation. But again, I'm too big of a Gary Moore fan not to love this amazing record through and through. You hear Gary Moore's guitar work, which is blazing and sizzling. S&M, toughest street in the town, some crazy shredding before it was even a notion, kind of Eddie Van Halen style stuff when Eddie Van Halen was still embryonic at that time, and of course the title track, which is insane. All of the songs here are great, and I love this record. And again, keep hating me, but another Snowy White. This is the record that got me into Snowy White and made me an insane maniac and addict for Snowy White's work. As soon as I put the record on and I heard the first harmonies, the first sounds of We Will Be Strong, I was hooked, and I knew that I just had to research this guitarist more, and I never looked back. I was very pleasantly surprised. Next up is a much more agreeable or more traditional choice, Johnny the Fox. Of course, not everybody will agree with that, but this one ranks very high for me. And then next up, I think the next 3 or 4 could be in practically any order. So today I feel this way, but the next 4 I would say are pretty much at the same level. Great albums with some amazing songs on them, and some that are and some questionable. Sometimes the sound is not that good, and sometimes them some other minor things that detract from the album. So I'll go with Fighting. Obviously, you have here Wild One. That's the song that got me hooked on Thin Lizzy in the first place. Then you have Bad Reputation, a great album that when it was released, Robbo was already not in the band. Thunder and Lightning could have been the first of this one. I mean, you have the amazing John Sykes through and through. And frankly, I would counter the claim that Renegade is the least Lizzy-ish album with this one. Maybe this is the overall least Lizzy-ish album. This is a straightforward heavy metal album. It's very similar to Blue Murder. Well, not very similar, but you can hear the similarities. Very polished, futuristic sound, great sound, nothing wrong to say. And then, of course, Jailbreak, which could sound better and have some great songs and some moments that I could do without. And like I said, we could arrange these records in practically any order and it would be the same, I think, at least for me. And then we have Nightlife with Sha La La in the end. Phil had a tendency to do that like a short, fast, hard-hitting, sizzling rocker as the last song on the record. So Vagabonds did that with the rocker, and on Johnny the Fox with Boogie Woogie Dance. So he kind of has that tendency with him. What else? So after Nightlife, the first 3, I think the best of those was Vagabonds, and then we can go in reverse order. Orphans and Thin Lizzy, the self-titled record. So that would be it for Thin Lizzy. I know some of you would hate me for it, but that is my ranking. And let's go now to the next band in chronological order, and that would be Judas Priest. And it's no secret that I'm a huge fan of this record, beginning to end. Every single song here is an absolute banger. Not a bad moment, not a bad second on this record. Amazing, a masterpiece. I think they should go on tour and play it end to end. it's a great record, and I think that a lot of Priest fans will agree with me, as they will with this. I'm sorry, I took out here a wrong record. I don't know why. I pulled out. Okay. Anyway, next up comes Sin After Sin, another insane record. Sounds way more modern than it actually was. Of course, it has Simon Phillips, which gives it such a good flavor. It's just unbelievable. Again, it's another record that I cannot say enough good things about. I grabbed this one by mistake, but I meant half of the record, of course. Sad Wings of Destiny, the amazing eternal classic, probably the most classic Judas Priest record. I grabbed the wrong record. This is Rock'n'Rolla and Sad Wings of Destiny mixed together, but it doesn't matter. Again, I don't need to talk that much about Sad Wings of Destiny. Of course, it has Victim of Changes and Ripper and all those great classics, and Genocide, Tyrant, just absolute banger, beginning to end. So I think at least with Priest, I'm much more on track with the majority of fans and what they think. Next up, of course, Painkiller. This is an amazing record. Ironically, the first time I listened to it, I wasn't really sure of what the heck is going on here, so I had to give it another listen or two until it really grew on me and rose to the top. And then, of course, we have this guy, Rock'n'Rolla, which was my favorite Priest record for a very long time. There's some amazing songs, obviously Run of the Mill, which is unmatched anywhere in the Judas Priest catalog, and they have some other very good songs on it. Cheater, Never Satisfied, Dying to Meet You, even the opener, One for the Road. I love that song. Anyway, so this is the pantheon of Judas Priest. The first four with Painkiller, it's like incredible. Next up, I'll go with another timeless classic, Defenders of the Faith. You may ask, hey, Screaming for Vengeance isn't on top of it? It could be. Overall, I like this one better. It has, the end, they kind of botched it. I think this was their wildest period, when they were completely cracked and heroin out of their minds. So I think they sort of creamed or neglected or just smeared away the end. So the second part of the second side, After Night Comes Down, which is an amazing, it's in the perfect spot, giving it a little bit of a breather, slow down. Love Bite, Eat Me Alive. Some heads are gonna roll. They could have gone. So from some heads are gonna roll down Heavy Duty and Defenders of the Faith. They really should have invested and bring in songs that are on par with the stuff that's on the first side. But great record, and that's really Screaming's advantage over this one. That Screaming is like pretty much like Stained Glass. There's not a bad moment on the record, but overall I prefer the sound and the aspect of this one. Interestingly, Martin Popoff, who goes a lot on Sea of Tranquility, and I think that's where I heard it, but maybe it's somewhere else, maybe he said it in one of his articles. He says that Defenders is like a Screaming for Vengeance number 2. And I very strongly disagree with that. It sounds different, there's a different feel to it, but on the other hand, I could see in a way why he said that, because up until then, there wasn't 2 consecutive records that were so close to one another. So between Rock'n'Rolla and Sad Wings, between Sad Wings and Sin After Sin, from Sin to Stained, from Stained to Hellbent for Leather, and so on, you always had a big change. Whereas from Screaming for Vengeance, if you expected a change as big and as drastic as between the previous album, well, you were in for a surprise. You got another thing coming. But anyway, this much for Defenders, and then the next album is going to be Killing Machine. This is the beginning of Judas Priest's commercial era. They changed a lot from Stained Glass to here, this is the first time that they have 2 consecutive albums with the same band, same lineup. And I think that Les Binks, at least, was not very happy with the direction they were going in. So great records, but very commercial oriented. This is the first time that they started to go towards a more radio acceptable, radio friendly kind of sound. I think it's the first one produced by Tom Allen, if I'm not mistaken. Mixed, recorded, assistant engineering. No, James Guthrie, like the guy who produced Stained Glass. And this is the first one. Well, I don't know if this pertains to the new release. I'd have to look up the original record, but it says here management by Bill Kirbishley and Jane Andrews, which don't get me started on that one. Okay, next up is Screaming for Vengeance. I don't think I need to expand on this. This is a timeless classic, again, another banger from the catalog that everyone can agree about. I think the only thing people might complain about is why I'm having it so low in the list, but it's number 7 or 8 from the top 10. And then after this I have Angel of Retribution, which I don't have yet on record, an absolute banger, and in my opinion on par with Defenders of the Faith and Screaming for Vengeance. Just another record that's good from start to finish, or almost. They kind of botched it with Loch Ness. That's a long, drawn-out song that they shouldn't have done. I should have kept it 4 or 5 minutes, maybe. But anyway, after Angel of Retribution, let's go with Point of Entry. This record, in my opinion, does not get enough love. It's a great record. It's at first hearing, you might not digest it that easily. Kind of, what are they doing? Where are they going? But I just love it. Don't Go, a very atypical Priest song with stop and go. All the songs, most of the songs are really great, and the sound is good. And they have, of course, Desert Plains and Heading Out to the Highway, Turning Circle. So I don't know why so many people crap on this record. It's an insane record. And then another one, Ram It Down. This would be my number 10 or 11 in the list. Another one that gets a lot of hate. And for this one, it's understandable. You can understand. They were coming down from Turbo, and of course, in the late 80s, they realized that there was, they took a left turn on a red light, which they shouldn't have, while they got introduced to new audiences. But again, they kind of made themselves part of that whole American hair metal scene, which I'm sure they weren't too happy about it, weren't consciously trying to be part of it. I'm sure they wanted the sales and the exposure and the money and all the good stuff that comes with it, but for longevity, long term, I don't think that was a great decision. But it is what it is, and Ram It Down was their attempt at coming back to the less commercial. Of course, we have the whole controversy with the drum machine. So that would be the top 10 for Judas Priest. And again, Angel of Retribution could be even higher, could be right after, or maybe even above Killing Machine, right after Defenders. So at that level, the last 3 or 4 that I mentioned, they kind of interchangeable. But at number 6, after Rock and Roll, it's definitely Defenders, and then you could say Killing Machine or Angel of Retribution, Screaming, Point of Entry, Ram It Down. Then Firepower, really they blew it out of the park in modern times with that one. Just a good record, good sound, good songs. Then British Steel, you might be surprised that I don't rank it higher. It's a good record, it's a good idea, but as Judas Priest records go, I think that all those that I mentioned are easily better. than British Steel, even though that's the one that commercially broke them, and it's kind of cool. It's very poppy on one hand and very metal-ish on the other hand. So they might have been those who introduced or those who pioneered the idea of this very poppy, very commercial sounding metal kind of sound. All right, so after British Steel, we have Invincible Shield, the new record. It's in the mail. I should get it on record in the next day or two. I've listened to it a little bit. It's good, but like I said in the big video, in the long video, it's too close to Firepower. It's trying to be a Firepower clone, and they kind of ran out for the most part. They ran out of ideas. So it could sound a little bit better. It could be a little bit less repetitive. Even the cover art is kind of lacks imagination and tries to be a little bit too contemporary, too abstract, which is not necessarily bad, but again, priests are in the business of creating trends, not following trends. Okay? After Invincible, I would put Redeemer of Souls, which actually I could even rank it higher. You know, it's a little bit ambiguous. Little sound problems on that record, but some very, very good songs on it. And of course, the bottom of the pile, you got Turbo, Demolition, and Jugulator. Again, I expanded on this idea in the long video. The two records with Ripper, unfortunately, due to no fault of his own, it's the guilty guys are probably Glenn and Ken and Ian, who decided to follow the trend and try to make some stupid I don't know what it's called, grunge, industrial death metal, whatever. Actually, I remember when Jugulator came out, finally, after all this incertitude and this whole dark period in the band's history, and the first thing I read about Jugulator, this before it even came out, is like, Jugulator is not a death metal record. And I'm like, oh, it is a death metal record. So as soon as I said, that was the first thing I read about I think there was a press release or something before the release. Already, before releasing the album, they already went into damage control mode. So if they knew that, or the press knew, why do the same thing with Demolition? But to their credit, I think Demolition was a little bit better. They toned it down, they made it a little bit more normal Priest, but not enough. Kind of like Ram It Down and Painkiller. It took 2 steps. So they made this atrocity Jugulator, which is horrible. And then they tried to fix the problem without fixing the problem. Also, the idea that they changed the logo, it was so stupid. You know, if you want to do something completely different, just change the band's name and don't do it under the Judas Priest banner. But anyway, it is what it is, so that's what it is. The bottom of the pile is Turbo, Demolition, and Jugulator. And frankly, if you don't listen to Demolition and especially Jugulator in a frame of mind that you're expecting a Judas Priest record, they're not bad, and they have some good parts, good solos, fairly good vocals from Ripper Owens. They could have chosen a better vocalist, but they didn't. And again, I expand on this idea in the long video. So let's put this to rest, and let's go to Motorhead. Like I told you, I don't even have one record, and I did have when I was a kid, but I didn't keep them. They were part of some sort of a trade deal. I don't know. I had them in my house for a couple of weeks or days. I had like half a box, like a dozen or so record, maybe a dozen and a half records that I had for trading, and I had a couple Motorheads in there. I think I had Bummer and Overkill and Iron Fist, that era of the band. But unfortunately, I traded them for things that I liked more. And at that time, I always overlooked Motorhead as another stupid, meaningless thrash metal band, which was a mistake. And I discovered, or at least rediscovered the band much later on. So anyway, my absolute forever maybe not forever, but all-time favorite from Motorhead is Overnight Sensation, Hammered, 2002 if I'm not mistaken, Overkill that I just mentioned. That's the second record that kind of has a very open, bright sound, like they wanted to go to a more metal sound. And then with the next one, Bomber, they went back a little bit to their sound. So between that and the previous record, another one that's more recent is Kiss of Death. Freaking excellent record. Motorhead, the first self-titled record, could have sounded better. If it sounded better, would have better made, better produced, it probably would rank higher. Another one that's very good and kind of I have a better relationship with it is 1916, because I think that was the first Motorhead record that I really listened to. So it came out in the 90s and I was already calming down a little bit from my anti thrash kind of mentality as a teenager. Then you have Bastards from the early 90s. We Are Motorhead, another very good record. Orgasmatron, great record. Inferno, also from the early 2000s. Sacrifice. You have this a whole period of Motorhead. Let's just say from Sacrifice, or even Bastards, all the way almost to the end, to about Kiss of Death, or what was the one after Kiss of Death? I think Motorizer, if I'm not mistaken, that were very good. Let's just say between Sacrifice, between Bastards and Kiss of Death, they had a run of home runs, a series of home runs, but absolute excellent records, a great sound, great musicianship, like they dropped the sloppiness that they had in the 70s and 80s. Just amazing. Oh, and in the middle of that, they have Snakebite Love, their absolute worst record ever. I don't even know how they managed to do that, but right there's kind of a splinter that sticks out like a sore thumb. But otherwise, they had a huge run. You could just take that whole period and however many records they have, 6, 7, 5, 8, I don't remember. Just very good records. But anyway, we were at Orgasmatron, Inferno, Sacrifice, Iron Fist, a little bit back to the 80s, Motorizer, Rock and Roll, not a bad record. March or Die. This is the line where it starts getting a little bit less good. Motorhead records. Another Perfect Day. I think that was the last one with the only one with Rabo. Wasn't so good. Ace of Spades. I never liked that record too much, and then we start going down. The World Is Yours. I think The World Is Yours is kind of the beginning of the decline, where they kind of ran out of creativity or the desire, the push to do great records. Aftershock, maybe Aftershock is better, I don't know. But it's definitely a decline. And then Bad Magic, I didn't care for it too much. And Snakebite Love, the absolute worst Motorhead record. I don't know what they were doing, but it was bad in my opinion. So I could do away with the last 2 or 3. So Bad Magic and Snakebite Love and Aftershock, The World Is Yours. You could cut them out of the catalog if you don't want them. But the first 10 or 15 that I mentioned, just great, cool, great, enjoyable rock and roll. So that's what I have for Motorhead in order. And last but not least, Iron Maiden. And I think with this one, you're not gonna hate me that much. The choices are pretty conventional. You can of course mix them up, but for me, the all-time favorite Iron Maiden record is this one, Killers. I remember seeing it in a record store. It was kind of a narrow record store, so you had the record bins lined up, one facing the other, and there was no room for 2 people to stand side by side. So if you were flipping the records, your asses were touching if you were directly one behind the other. And smack dab in the middle, in the other wall, as you stepped into the store, they had a kind of a display where you could see a certain number of records, and this was kind of smack dab in the middle. And the second I saw this album cover, I knew I just had to have it, and that was my romance with Maiden. So that's Killers, an absolute excellent record, full of energy. These strong riffs. You can hear a very young and determined and enthusiastic Iron Maiden. This is a very creative Iron Maiden. When this came out, this was my all-time favorite record for quite a long time. It took some time for my head to cool down from Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. An amazing epic record. Power Slave, another very popular choice. Incredible record. They just have all these great songs banging out one after the other. And like I told you in the long video, Back in the Village is my absolute favorite off of the album. Today it's considered a deep cut. I don't even know what deep cut means. You know, when an album is meant to be listened to as an album, then all the songs are just songs, right? You take out the single as be kind of a teaser, like a trailer for a movie. Next up, which one should I bring up? I have a difficult time deciding between these three, but I think I'll give the edge to Iron Maiden, the first record. Very good. Prowler is a huge favorite of mine. I don't care that much to the two quieter songs here, Remember Tomorrow and Strange World, but the rest are just absolute bangers. Transylvania, Phantom of the Opera, of course, Charlotte Hearted, not bad. Iron Maiden, it's a classic to this day. Next up you have The Number of the Beast, which is another great record, but I would still put Iron Maiden, the first one, on top of it. But it's a tough decision. And as you would expect, the next choice would be Peace of Mind. Again, these three, they could be considered at the same level. So Maiden, Iron Maiden, the debut album, Number of the Beast, and Peace of Mind. Again, very classic and normal choices. Next up, you might hate me for this one, to putting this one in the top 10, but it's Fear of the Dark. When it came out, especially after No Prayer for the Dying, which I also hold in higher respect than most, but when Fear of the Dark came out, I'm like, whew, they redeemed themselves. And I was very worried that I would miss Adrian on the record, which I do, but the Maiden, being Maiden, is kind of makes up for it. And it's great that Adrian and Bruce didn't leave at the same time, so I'm grateful that Bruce did Fear of the Dark with them instead of leaving. Although they might have benefited from Bruce leaving earlier. I can only imagine if they did Fear of the Dark with the next singer, this guy Blaze Bayley, or even if they would have opted for a better choice, someone who's more similar in a vocal range to Bruce than in looks and the style of singing, maybe that would have been better. And maybe the next two would have come out better, but who knows? It's coulda, woulda, shoulda, but we can't foretell. So again, Peace of Mind, and then after the top five, we got Peace of Mind, Fear of the Dark, Dance of Death, very big favorite of mine. That, I think, from the new era, let's just say the post reunion or post 2000s, it's two hands down the best. They're all good, they all sound great, they have great moments on them, but Dance of Death, man, to me it's just a great album, start to finish, good sound on it. Although I think that's on the one that they started to play funny games in the production and trying to be a little bit maybe too creative, but they didn't go too crazy like those that came out after. Then I would say No Prayer for the Dying. As much as a lot of people hate that record, to me that's a very similar situation than with Judas Priest's Point of Entry. Point of Entry came out between two bangers, or at least two commercially very successful records, between British Steel and Screaming for Vengeance. And then it was sandwiched in between them, and it was kind of weird. The sound was toned down and not as manipulated and as hard as both of them. So No Prayer of Dying, I think, suffers a similar fate, and it has some great songs on it, and they could have improved the sound of the guitars, in my opinion. And of course, Somewhere in Time, which may sound like a weird choice for most people, but again, it's still in the top 10, so it's not on the top of the top 10, but at least in the top 10. So in the bottom of the top 10, I did not care that much for Somewhere in Time when it came out. Still a great record, but it's not in the top 5, and it just makes the cut to the top 10. Then we are left with the modern records, the post Fear of the Dark, I'm sorry, and the post reunion. So the Final Frontier, I would put it on top, either the Final Frontier or Senjutsu, the last one, but I haven't listened to it enough to like it that much. But it sounds very good, and it's a very, very strong record. So I would say Final Frontier, Senjutsu, the Book of Souls also started to came out from that little bit of a hiccup that they went through with some of the post 2000 records. Then the two records with Blaze, Virtual X and X Factor. Between the two, not an easy decision, but I would put Virtual 11 a little bit higher than X Factor, but they're very close to another. But I think on Virtual 11 they had a similar situation than Priest, again, with Jugulator and Demolition, just not to that extent. Like Jugulator and Demolition are just not Priest albums. That's pretty horrible. Maiden, of course, didn't go to that extent. They didn't follow the trend. They didn't try to make something thrashy or industrialized at that time. But yeah, I would say Virtual 11 and then X Factor, and then the last two that I like least is Matter of Life and Death and Brave New World. Kind of a bad sound, just doesn't cut it for me. Maybe I need to listen to them more, but from the time that I listened to them for the first time, I didn't like the sound, I didn't like the aspect of the record. They were to me always the least Maiden-ish records. So again, we start with Killers, Seven Son, Power Slave, Number of the Beast or Iron Maiden or Peace of Mind, kind of interchangeable. Then we go to the next segment or next tier, next level, Fear of the Dark, Dance of Death, No Prayer for Dying, Somewhere in Time, and then most of the newer ones and the two with Blaze. So that's all I had to do. So I finally ranked them. I hope that I redeemed myself, and if you want to hear the more in-depth take on each of these bands, not individually, I like to pair them and do the history of two different bands. But I did Motorhead and Priest, and I did Jethro Tull and Iron Maiden, and Thin Lizzy I paired it up with Gary Moore, but there is a bigger Gary Moore feature coming sometime soon. So in the meantime, rock on!